We acknowledge the Nungawal and the Nangbari people, who are the traditional custodians of the Canberra area, and we pay our respects to the elders, past and present. We also need to pay our respects to the people who have organised this seminar. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. Neglected truths, we also understand, are, well, it's a contested word really, neglected truths, because what is neglected by us may not be neglected by others. However, in our project, and I'll talk about who the "our" is, in our project, we share these ideas. In our presentation today, of course, it's Richard and André presenting, and one of our shared big ideas is that to forget one's ancestors is to be a brook without a source, a tree without roots. And we believe that's very significant. I could have drawn that from several sources. I chose the Maori source because that was in recognition of the influence my grandchildren have had on me in this way of thinking. So, André, the next one. The context, we have a project. So when I talk about we and our project, we're about 7 of us in the Indian and Me research group. Do check our website because you'll get a lot more details of what we're doing. Quite ambitious plans, but that's for the group. We'd like to share the big ideas here with you. We share reflections, personal stories, which we'll do today briefly, and hopefully have a bit of a discussion. Truth-telling is a very important part of our thinking and our reflections. Thanks. So here's my story, just a quick idea. This is my family story. Well, it seems strange to me now because I love my grandmother dearly and still love her. However, all I heard about was about the Glen days and how Scottish I was and our Scottish background. And England was home to my grandmother. And then I did my DNA test and I found that I had 1% Scottish DNA. Now that's quite an extraordinary omission. So to address this with understanding, because I know why my grandmother said that, but I need to address this. So we look at 2 main strategies. The first one is through family history, and of the 7 of us, I have to admit I'm the one who's the main pusher of this genealogy, but I am very keen in the idea and would love to share that expertise with you. I've got plenty of time. If people are interested, we can form interest groups, we can do a lot of work. So that's the first one. I'll give you a taste of what I've done. And then the second one is remembering, reflecting on stories, André. So in the first one, see, I traced, and it's very difficult to trace, and we've had a few people talk about this, because when you look at the family, so I'm looking at 3 lines, Johnson, Knight, and Glenday. That's the famous Scottish stuff, Glenday. So I look at the Johnson line, and I go Anglo-Indian, marries Anglo-Indian, Anglo-Indian marries Anglo-Indian again, and again, and again, till 1820, when Thomas arrives on the scene, but no documentation till Thomas has a child with, now the document comes into play, because they've had a child. The child is called Thomas. The father, his name is there in brackets, foreigner, and the mother is Mary, brackets, native. That's the end of my research. Well, it's not the end, and I'd love to talk to you about why it may not be the end. However, the documentation, that's the end. Can you imagine? I mean, the name of a woman has been taken away and she's just been called Mary. There's a very good website I'll refer to where some other people are doing some great work in this area. So Thomas Johnson then goes ahead, and I find that he has left a will. But his will is not to marry. So clearly he's had some more children. And he's left his will to one of his subsequent wives. I would imagine that Mary wasn't a wife of Thomas. Lots of research to be done, lots of interesting stuff. And our other, the B side of our focus is reflecting on stories. So when I reflect on my story, and here's just a strategy I want to share with you. And don't worry about these key words that you'll see. They're just me thinking when I first started this. So let's think about a seesaw. I've always thought about the Anglo-Indian as a hyphenated culture, rich on both sides, fantastic, hyphenated, sounds good in the head. But the next slide shows that that's mine. It's Anglo-weighted. And the next slide shows more Anglo-weightedness. And the one after shows the Catholic family, the family school, the all English stuff. And I give a slight weighting to the other side. And then there's Elvis Anani and John Wayne and Cliff and Engelbert and the Nawab Pataudi and Farouk Engineer and a couple of other guys who were my heroes. Okay, so this is just me thinking and using this balance without balance. And the next one is the, again, True Grit, Dirty Dozen, Magnificent Seven, and Jana Gana Mana. And Jana Gana Mana. And we've got another Jana Gana Mana, the next slide, I think. And the two at home, and I mean, in our house, you'd never hear any Indian music. And there was Jana Gana Mana, that's it. So, the next slide is another notion of reality. And there's the seesaw, completely out of whack. And someone said, one of the speakers said, but talked about this Anglo-Indian community as being confused. Well, I've shown you confusion in evolution. So there's a lot to reflect on and a lot to think about. And I would encourage you to really look at these two strategies of reflection. And you don't have to use the seesaw. You could come up with all sorts of other innovative ways of thinking about this balance. There needs to be, though, an element where, and hopefully we have come to the stage where we can openly share stories about the richness of our past, both Anglo and non-Anglo. But we really need to dig deep and pull out some really rich examples of the non-Anglo. Now, I've just shown you a small portion of, you can see the other stuff on the website of that seesaw. There's other stuff like food and, you can go on and on and on and look at that seesaw and how it's balanced or whether it's not balanced. It depends on you. And in my case, it's quite screwed up, actually, totally out of balance. Now, in that notion of truth-telling, I'm going to pass the baton over to André, who's going to tell you a little bit about his story.
Well done, Richard.
Let's hear it for Richard. Wasn't that seesaw amazing? I learned so much about stuff from talking to this amazing man over here. So, my bit is on truth-telling. And I want to start with a story. And the story is about an HR manager who is interviewing a candidate. And the HR manager says to the candidate, okay, tell me one of your weaknesses. And the candidate says, honesty and truth-telling. And the HR manager says, hey, that's not really a weakness, is it? And the candidate says, I don't care what you think, right? Truth-telling sometimes has a double-edged sword. So some of the things that I might share with you might be a little bit uncomfortable, but it's my story. And that's what I'm going to talk about over here today. My name's André Alphonso. Born in Calcutta, immigrated to Australia when I was 12 years old. And here we are in Canberra talking about truth-telling, which is a little bit ironic, don't you think? The capital where politicians freely roam among among the natives. Yeah, and where truth might be as rare as a sunny day in England, maybe, right? Okay, so my presentation is in a couple of bits. Let me just go through what I'm going to be talking about. Formation of identity is really important because as an Anglo-Indian, I have struggled with this all of my life, particularly growing up in Australia. And I'm going to talk about that by a couple of ways. One is my personal story, and it's my story. It's probably a lot like your stories over here. The second thing, which is also really important about identity, is the belief system that was implanted into me, much like it was for every one of us in the room over here. And then I'm going to talk about something that happened to me. Lightning struck, right? And I had to go through a complete transformation of my identity, which I will get to. That's part 3. And part 4 is really, so what? What's this all mean? You know, why am I talking about this stuff? So let's just quickly go through the first bit. So my story. So immigrated to Australia, 12 years old, went to a school, at a really good school, except I was the only brown kid in the entire school. So as you can imagine, life was in the school, in a boys' school, a little bit difficult, right? The sorts of names I got was, Darky and Bung and Dago and Wog and all those sorts of things that really hurt deeply. In fact, there was another kid in the school in our 25th year school reunion, and his name was Sammy Lowe, and Sammy was Asian. And in our school reunion, he says, André, the happiest day of my life is when you showed up in Form 1. Right? So, like a lot of boys, in the formative years of their lives, you need to survive, right? So I had to survive. So what did survival mean? Because I had to become Australian. I had to murder the Indian in me. I had to get rid of the head wobble. I had to get rid of the accent, but I couldn't get rid of this, the brown, right? And as difficult as it was going through that, you know, you kind of survive and you adapt and you make it along there. And the thing is that we often talk about belonging. And the opposite of belonging is not belonging. The opposite of belonging is fitting in. And I spent a lot of my life fitting in. And you may say, yeah, André, that was what happened in the schoolyard. But I dare say that, you know, there's times right now to this very day that I still feel like I'm fitting in. You know, I still squirm in my seat when I see Pauline Hanson saying, send them back. You know? And when you see the far right going and having protests along the way, you go, you know, this whole issue of white Australia does hurt deep. And do I still feel like I belong here? Sometimes not, right? Because we have this brain. 90% of the things that happen, 99% of the things that happen to us are fantastic. We have great Australian friends. You know, my wife is Australian. And okay. So, but the thing I was saying is that, you know, we think of the negative stuff. We have this Velcro brain and a Teflon brain. Teflon brain are the good things that happen to us we like, but they go away. The Velcro brain is the things that happen to us that stick. They stick for a day, a week, a month, a year, a lifetime. And some of these things do stick with us for a lifetime. So yeah, you know, some of those things do matter over here. But I want to talk about something else, which is the belief systems that we are given. So belief systems are given to us when we're born. They're actually implanted into us by our parents, our teachers, our churches, our religious people who are around us, our siblings. And the thing about these belief systems is it tells you what to believe, how to behave, what to do, what not to do, and so on and so forth, except for one thing. They're put into you as a young child when you don't have the wherewithal to negotiate these beliefs. You can't actually say, Mum, you know, I'm not sure, I'm good with that. It's kind of what you get, right? It's put into you. And these belief systems become our book of laws. Now, being an Anglo-Indian growing up, most of the beliefs were amazing. About, as you can look around the room, connection and respect of other people, and caring, and all of the other things, the seesaws that we saw Richard tell us about. But the thing about belief systems is they are unconscious. You don't even know they exist until something happens. And they're also resilient. Let's talk about the unconscious bit first. We don't know. It's like our operating system. It's like your computer operating system. You don't see it, but it controls everything. Now, there's a story of two fish that are swimming along, and an older fish goes past them and says, "Water's nice this morning, boys." And the two fish look at each other and they go past, and one fish turns to the other and says, "What the hell is water?" Right? Unconscious. You don't see it because you're right in it. The other thing about belief systems is that they're resilient. Right? Another story, two guys outback Australia having a beer in a pub. One guy is religious and the other guy is atheist. And they're talking about the existence of God. And the atheist says, "Look, it's not as if I haven't tried this God thing." He said, "A month ago I was lost in the outback, couldn't see, I thought I was going to die. I fell to my knees and I prayed to God." And the religious guy says, "Well, now you must believe, you're here." And the atheist says, "No, two Aboriginal people found me and took me back to camp." Right? So it doesn't matter what happens. Your belief system is your interpretation of reality and truth. And that's what makes it so pervasive into us. So let me tell you about the belief systems that I had growing up. Most of them, as I said, were amazing. But there's a couple of ones that I think really do strike home for me, which led to, this confused identity. So in one side, my lived experience were telling me, "You're not good enough. You're not good enough as the white guy next door. You don't belong here." And then mum and dad were like, "André, you're not." My mum used to have this phrase that used to say, that we used to laugh at. And she'd say, "You are not a bloody Indian, you're an Anglo-Indian." Yeah? Has anybody heard that? Yes, of course we have. And it's in your head, right? That it goes in there. And that became a really big thing about me. It became a big thing because I didn't see myself as an Indian. When someone asked me, "Where are you from?" I would agonize by going through what Richard talked through. Well, my grandfather was from here, and a Carol and a Murphy, and it's Irish and Scottish and the Glendays. Well, someone had sex with an Indian. Who was that? Right? Don't know, because we don't acknowledge that. And my mum, and certainly in the belief systems that were put into me, it didn't. And there's one story which I hesitate telling you because I have a little bit of shame associated with it. But my two brothers, my eldest brother was in Canada, had a very strong Canadian accent. My other brother, I'm the youngest of three, he came with me over here. And we were walking down George Street one day. In the 70s, I was about 13 or 14. And this Indian gentleman walks past us and says, looks at us, makes eye contact, sees another brown person and says, "Hey, are you boys from India?" And my brother looks up to him and says, "No, man, I'm Canadian. These are Australian. Bugger off." And and off we went. And we went home and told my mum and dad about it, and we all had a laugh. And we all said, "Ha ha ha ha." And now I look back and go, what the hell were we thinking? Right? What the hell were we thinking? And my mum used to, and so the first belief system was reject the Indian heritage, white blood is superior to brown blood. That came through in the subtext of what mum said. Maybe you didn't use those words. You're not a bloody Indian, you're an Anglo-Indian, right? The other thing she used to say is that, because I was the darkest of the three brothers, three sons, and she used to always say, André is dark because I drank a lot of Coca-Cola. So the Coca-Cola, I was called her Coca-Cola baby, right? Which basically says, So there's a confusion that we talk about in identity. One says you're not good enough as a white person, and then the belief system says you're better than the Indian. Who are you as an Anglo-Indian? Yeah, and then lightning struck, basically. Right? And for some reason, well, not some reason, for a good reason, we went to India. My wife, our daughters went to live there to open up a business. And we went there in this half-baked identity of a confused person as to what an Anglo-Indian was. And again, in India, I would agonize telling people I wasn't Indian because that's what I came from, that I'm Anglo-Indian. And they would look at me and laugh. And some of them would say to me, haha, you think you're superior to us because you worship a white god. So a friend of mine did say that to me once but in India, something strange happened to me. Right? With my family, we lived there for 4 years. This was after 38 years of leaving there. So I was 50 when I went back, right?
The 90s. The 90s?
No,
1990s.
2008. Yeah, I'm not that old.
Just trying to put that knowledge.
Yeah, 2008 we went back, and we fortunate enough to set up the business, went there to make money, do the thing like entrepreneurs we talk about, come back, and everything changed. India had a different plan for me, a very different plan for me. It wasn't about making money, but it was not about giving me what I wanted, but she gave me everything I needed around identity formation. Yeah. And what I realized is when I was there, we got to travel north, south, east, and west. We went as far north as Gulmarg in Kashmir. Some of those have been there, beautiful. Trivandrum down south. Spent a lot of time, went to lots of weddings there. We went from west to the Thar Desert in Jaisalmer, all the way through, Guwahati and Assam. We walked and lived in villages with people and ate their food and stayed in their homes. We had a great time, and we also saw the ultra rich because I was a businessman. We stayed and did that sort of stuff. It bludgeoned my belief system, bludgeoned it. This crap about not being better than being Indian, and that was the thing that came across, hit me, and I realized that the plan India had for me was to help me identify who I was. That Indian people are talented, clever, loving, rich or poor, and she is ascending, as we know. That I, André Alphonso, am part of a great nation and represent a great people who have built and are building great things, long and rich history. And that the toxic beliefs that I've carried for long, up until that, a lot of my life, was someone else's beliefs, not mine, not the truth. And this is about truth telling. It's within my control. And most importantly, to never feel ashamed of the amazing country in which I was born in. Never. That the Indian blood that runs through my veins and the color of my skin is something I have to uphold and be really proud of. And to instill, thank you. And to instill that in my children. I have 4 daughters and a stepson who is actually white, and he is as Indian as I am, and believes in it, right? So I believe in this India. I believe in this amazing country, and I think we need to right that seesaw that Richard talked about. So what now? I'm almost finished, right? So the last bit is so what? And the so what is a really big opportunity that exists for all of us. I think right at the start, Gordon said we're at the threshold of this Anglo-Indian identity disappearing from our lives. I think for us in this room, we have an amazing opportunity to stop that from happening. We have to turn the ship. And we turn the ship by actually embracing the Indian in us. And let me tell you how this works. All right, there is a vacant position that Richard and me spoke about, and the position is that of a modern elder. Looking around the room, it's a job that you can choose to take up or not. But we have to help our children embrace the Indian in them. Because if you think about it, the thing that will hold future generations and future Anglo-Indian conferences, wouldn't it be great to see this room full of our children who are here to embrace the Indian in them? Because that's the thing that matters, not the Australian, the Indian. That's the thread that keeps us here, because we all come from different parts. But to do that, we cannot push them. They're not interested in being told. That's where the modern elder comes in, right? So let me tell you about what this modern elder is, because I think it's a really important role to play. Sometimes we think about old as being elderly. A modern elder is not that. On the left-hand side, you can see, the elderly. To prove yourself, let me tell you, the modern elder is to improve yourself. Not tell you what's right or wrong, but to listen to our children with true empathy. Because if I was confused about my identity, so are my daughters. I've got to listen to them and help them navigate the seas ahead. When we had the Cronulla riots in Sydney, my daughters were petrified. They did not want to go past the bridge on the south side because they could pass as Muslim, right? And I thought, goodness me, how do I help them navigate that? Not to deny the Indian in them, but to embrace it in a way which is healthy for them. A modern elder is not about judgment, passing judgment, but it's about being curious about their lives and what they have to do. It's about not feeling that you have to have reverence, but you've got to be relevant to them. You're not a babysitter for our grandchildren, you're a guide. And it's not a fixed mindset, it's a growth mindset. I think that's the opportunity that sits for every one of us in the room. That to help us, the generations of Anglo-Indians to come, not let it end here, but to bring them with us. We've got to pull them in with us. And I think the way we do that is to embrace the Indian in us. I'm just going to pass it over to Richard to finish it off.
Well done, André.
Thanks, André. Now, just very quickly, and I'm just going to take 1 minute to finish this off. The last slide, André is asking a question, so call to action. Look, a special interest group, anytime, please. We can form a special interest group on family tree digging anytime, okay? And that's in face-to-face in Melbourne, otherwise with all the electronic devices, and that's a free thing. We've got there's another thing I started here called Ask Bert, and please, that Bert is not our Bert Payne, because we might all be in trouble. So Ask Bert. Bert stands for the British India Research Team, and this Bert has already started. Started in Kolkata, but we want to have Bert in Chennai and especially in Chennai and in Mumbai and Delhi for sure. Now, what they will do is you contact them directly by email and you pay them directly, and there's no middle person involved at all. And you ask them what you want. So, for example, I lived in number 7 Chote Elliott Road. Can you give me a picture of my house as it is today? Can you interview the panwala outside and let's know if he's still alive? They'll give you a quote first. When they finish the job, you pay them directly. I will do the training and any help that people want, okay, on the side. So that's if you've got people that you can recommend, please, I want to hear some names that people who can join on that Ask Bert team. There's no limit, and anywhere in India. I'd like to acknowledge, and this Facebook site is excellent. It's called Our Indian Mothers, and it's run by Finella, and it's a Facebook. Anyone can join and have a look. It's really some that's her. And there's some gut-wrenching stories there. And through the work we're doing, and it's far away, our book and a film, but there's a voice, and there's a ghost of a voice that comes through, finished. And the voice says, Avaz suno, listen to the sound, listen to the voice. And that's the voice of Mary. Thank you.